short summary of where we are with the current plan. And there, as of so far this year, we've had over 9,000 visits to the comprehensive update website. Of those 9,900 of those visitors have contributed to the website, with 351 of the 900 doing the initial survey. This May, we also had our community workshop with over 125 residents attending. And under the current strategy survey, which is the second formal survey, we've had a little over 300 participants in there. So we're excited about the numbers and the level of participation. We still recognize, though, we have areas that are not being reflected in terms of how their population percentages are broken in there, and we're still striving to do some additional outreach to get that information out. That will lead to some upcoming events. Ms. Doty is going to attend the Chantel Neighborhood Association meeting this Saturday on the 11th. Wednesday on the 11th, and then the advisory committee will meet October 12th. We'll have representatives at the Villa Park opening on October 14th, and the goal is to work towards a draft plan for an open house on November 30th, and then come back to the commission for a public hearing and presentation somewhere either December or January. That's going to be one of the items the advisory committee will discuss next week on Thursday. Is the schedule in there. Additional engagements that we worked on. We attended Indian Meadows Park opening and Irv Zeitz Park opening. We issued a whole bunch of flyers to the various apartments along Olive Boulevard. And then we've had over 12 hours of stakeholder interviews with various groups, renters, Blacks, Asian Americans, business representatives, and such. So we're working hard to make sure that the plan reflects the community as a whole in there. We did get some results of the second survey, and I wanted to share those with the commission in there. The advisory committee will be getting into those in more detail next week, and you'll probably see these coming up. So these are just quick updates of what we've heard from the second round of survey so far. One is one of the questions was, what concerns, if any, do you share about the continuation of infill housing development in there? And about 35% had no concern. 26.5% have concerns about the size and height. So again, and then 22% regarding affordability in there. But overall, it represents that the guidelines are working, and yes, the guidelines do need some tweaking in there to further that in there. In terms of how people would prefer to address these type of concerns regarding infill development, over 70% said increased regulations. And again, I think we hear well, and we know that the guidelines, which were updated in 2015 and 2017, probably need to be reevaluated again. Another one regarding commercial development, which kind of commercial development do you prefer? Nearly 50% of the respondents, and these were out of the 295 surveys they had at the time, would consider additional regulations while encouraging new development. 30% thought that the process was working well and continued the current approach, with 10.5% or nearly 11% saying that we should kind of hold off and reduce the overall amount of commercial development on the corridor. This second survey also touched on some environmental sustainability components and themes, and one of them was about environmental issues, preserving the natural areas and habitat. Now that had various groups of tree preservation, stormwater, open space. So it tackled a bunch of different subjects, but you can see 81% support providing educational resources to our residents about the values of natural resources. 89% think continue to utilize the existing regulations. 83% of the survey respondents indicated that the city should consider to impose new regulations on development, and 94% believe that the city should lead by example in there. So those are some of the highlights from that initial survey. Chairman, I'd be glad to answer any specific questions. The advisory committee does have a meeting next week, and of course that Contains the chairman, Jergel, vice chairman Wagner, and acting secretary Lewis, and that. So,
Well, this is great. I mean, this is kind of what we need, is to get everybody's input so we can kind of move on. So that's fantastic. Anybody who's in attendance, if you haven't participated in these, we highly encourage you to do so. So if you can. All right, good. And tell your neighbors, okay? It's important to try to get as much outreach as we can. All right, Carlos, does anybody have any questions for Carlos? Okay, we'll move on to old business. And this is the first item, or the only item on old business is,
Public comments, or you?
oh, God, thank you. Thank you. Are there any public comments in the audience? Seeing none, Carlos, will you see if there's anybody online?
there's nobody online, sure.
Okay, then we'll move on to old business. 46 Stony Lane. Carlos?
Okay. Chairman, you have a revised report dated today along with a drawing attachment, and then you have the previous documents from the initial petition. This item was before you at your last meeting. There was some concerns expressed regarding the impact to the neighboring property, and the commission deferred action, requesting that the two neighbors talk about the potential design and what may impact, going across property lines or so, and get a better understanding. Mr. Wang, or Dr. Wang, who is a resident at 46 Stony Side, did reach out to his neighbor off of Ramsgate. They've had discussions, and he has discussed a potential solution that you have before you. In there, real quickly, they're proposing a new pool and a hardscape area to the new house to accommodate the stormwater requirements for the city. They expanded one of the detention pits when they were constructing the home above and beyond. So they have more storage space available, and that's what their intent was to use use for the pool when they came in for that, which is now. But there was some concerns about some of the topography and the really volume and how fast that stormwater moves above grade. Remember, all the house is going into these detention pits. Majority of that pool and the pool footprint would also go into that pit in there. What they're proposing is to provide a kind of a Gabion system down here at the lower, what would be the southeast corner of the property. Remember, there's an MSD inlet kind of tucked in here. The intent of this system, it's about 6 feet wide and about 30 feet long. It would be to capture that runoff flow that's coming down either from the driveway turnaround or the grades as you go in the back of the lot in there, and get that water to hit those rocks, slow down, possibly permeate into the ground, and really slow it down before it continues on its course. And some water will continue in there. They provided also with some specifications to take a look at. In there, you have a copy of the plan set of it's just a diagram, but we do have the more specifics that the commission would want to see in terms, but it would be again a Gabion system that'd be kind of raised a little bit with the goal again to hold and stop, slow down some of this water, allow for that permeation. I did talk to the neighbor at number 11 Ramsgate, and again he had confirmed Dr. Wang had spoke with him in there and was familiar with the proposal. His concern is just making sure that in the process that it gets done to those specs and all that, and we would tie this as part of the permit in there. Be glad to answer any specific questions. You do have the details in there. Dr. Wang is here.
Carlos, I don't see the specs. Or the...
Yeah, I can post those up. I didn't put them in there because they were kind of a cost analysis in there, but I'll bring them back right up for you, sir.
And also, while you're trying to find that, I assume that this is also going to take care of the erosion issues that was kind of
correct
on the south side.
This will help address that a little better. Bear with me 1 second here. That's what you have right now. And Chairman, bear with me, I'm gonna get that.
No
for
worries.
this.
What size rock?
And that's what you have right there.
Okay.
So, Jim,
Yeah, go ahead, Carol.
so Carlos, has our stormwater engineer taken a look at this?
No, we don't ask them for the pool aspects of it, but we can share that with information with them. Right?
Okay,
Yeah.
I just wanted,
Okay.
I thought it'd be a good idea just to double check and make sure that
For sure.
that's, seems to be adequate, but it looks to me like they've spent a lot of time and thought on coming up with a solution.
Yeah, I concur. Go ahead.
In the inlet, is this gonna go in the inlet? This,
No, the inlet is probably about 10 feet behind
okay,
in there. The ultimate intent, of course, and that being a low point, water will get to that inlet, but right now, a lot of water north of this site is already getting to that inlet, and some of the concern is it's getting overwhelmed too quickly
okay.
in there. Now, remember, a lot of this hard surface area that's required by code is going into the detention pit. That is in full compliance. This would be a step above and beyond to kind of address the velocity of the grading from the new home in there, so.
Yeah, go ahead. I think we're ready.
First line, 46 side lane on the resident.
You turn to the
Is that better? Okay.
Perfect.
Chris Wang, 46 Side Lane on the resident. Yeah, I talked to Mr. Sofer quite a bit about, what could we possibly do to address the problem? Obviously, the big issue was the velocity down that slope that you see in the top left picture there. And, there's some erosion there now, but, once sod is in place and it's regraded a little bit, a lot of that erosion it should honestly resolve the erosion issue, but the velocity, it's still slope. The slope is there. And we thought this is since that was the biggest issue facing us was the velocity down that slope to slow the water down as much as possible, because downstream, the neighbor's biggest problem is that massive influx of water when you have a storm. That's what you can't handle, is that huge influx of water into the sewer system. So this hopefully will the goal was to do everything possible that we could to not make the problem worse. And if we're slowing the water down, so she won't get a massive influx of water as much, hopefully not nearly as much from our property, then it will not be as much of a problem for her. I mean, obviously I can't control what Downey Lane does. It's a huge concrete street that's going into sewer. I can't control that. But what I can control is the water runoff of my property. I think this does. And so what I did was I consulted with Matt Grodicke, who's he's a horticulturalist, he's an arborist, he's a landscape director at Hackman Lawn and Landscape. So obviously I chose a very reputable landscape company because I want it done so that so we can do the best job possible to fix the problem. So actually the system actually spans both properties. And the goal is to literally, again, to stop as much water as possible, to slow it down so that some of it can be absorbed into the ground before it hits the sewer grate. And the stuff that the water that does get there, it's slowed down. So you're not getting as much of that massive influx of water into that sewer inlet, because that's the issue.
I agree. Could be a good potential area to use some more landscaping of plants and stuff like that around it too.
I mean, I know my wife wants to build a garden at some point too, but
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't 100% built it into the plan, but yes, we will put some landscaping in too, but that's not built into the plan right now.
Yeah.
And I know that Mr. Silver wants us to get that system in sooner rather than later too. But again, I think that's what we're addressing is the biggest problem is that massive influx of water, the velocity of water. And this is the best. And when I talked to Matt at Hackman, again, we're going to raise the grade a tiny bit at the corner.
Mhm.
Again, the whole idea is to decrease that large slope down, slow the water down, so that they're not getting that massive influx into the sewer inlet.
I definitely think it's a good idea. So does
Sorry.
anybody on the commission have any questions? Seeing none, thank you. I
Can I push the button?
appreciate that you were able to, yeah, go ahead and turn it on. Appreciate you working with your neighbors. That's definitely helps. All right, Carlos, or does anybody have any public comments related to this agenda item? Carlos, will you please check to see if there's anyone online?
There's nobody online, sir.
Oh, okay, good. So that being said, any further discussion? Seeing none, do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion. Motion to approve the petition for site plan, community design and concept stormwater management plan review as amended for a 648 square foot in-ground pool and a 956 square foot concrete pool deck at 46 Stony Side Lane as presented in the memorandum from the Department of Planning and Community Development dated October 5th, 2023, subject to any staff conditions noted therein.
Motion's been made by Brian Lewis. Do I hear a second?
I'll second, sure.
And seconded by Carol. Carol Wagner. Carlos, you please call the vote.
Commissioner Wallach,
Approved.
Commissioner Spiegelglass,
Approved.
Commissioner Rosenberg,
Approved.
Commissioner Ragsdale,
Approved.
Commissioner Lewis,
Approved.
Commissioner Wagner,
Approved.
and Chairman Drago.
Approved.
The motion passes unanimously. The next step in the process is going through the building permit, and then we'll have a discussion with our stormwater consultants.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Carlos, no notice that on the report.
The old report, it had the Doug Cohen.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, I didn't want to change it.
Yeah, I remember that did bring it up again, so. Good, good. Okay, that being said, we'll move on to other business. Discussion items regarding commission reviews. Carlos or
Yes.
Paul.
Something got. All right, we do have Mr. Martin here, and there, I wanted to kind of go over just a little bit on reviews while he was here, and then we'd talk about the bamboo, items. It's one of the things, we talked about at our meeting in June and July. But I gave you a report because we have several new members to kind of give an idea of the type of reviews that the commission does. The three most important are listed here. There are some others, but you do community design reviews, site plan reviews, special permit reviews, and sometimes you do them all in one. There are other things that you do too. You do plats, you do text amendments in terms of recommendations, and then and of course, concept stormwater management plans in there. But I wanted to distinguish these three to the commission in terms so you can get more comfort and a better understanding of the process as we go through. When we do a community design review, you're essentially working as the community design review board. It used to be an old board and commission that the city had that was an architectural review board. So at that point, you know, you have a lot of flexibility in terms of what you consider as a good architecture and design. But you have to build a consensus and everybody has to be in agreement in there. Because it can get a little finicky in terms of different, because we're talking about personal perspectives. Back in 2004, I believe, we put together a guideline book to assist us in residential reviews. And then in 2012, we put together chapter 428, which is community design review for the Olive Boulevard corridor. That's more of an ordinance form to help us in non-residential type of reviews. But the community design reviews, and you have it segments in your packet, you know, talk about how we want to encourage in design in the process. We broke it down to some simple fundamentals that we would look at during the review: massing, roofs, garages, elevation, articulation, materials. And then we also have site grading, tree preservation, stormwater management, and then a component for residential additions and accessory structures in there. And through that, you provide some verbal guidance and also some pictorial guidance of what the commission considers as designs that we'd like to encourage. And then you also show some illustrations of what you do not want to see, you know, in there. And then you entrust in staff to do those reviews and bring that information to you. Ours is just a recommendation, and the commission has the authority to believe, you know, no, staff, you're wrong, or no, we feel that based on evidence presented that things should, you know, there should be a window here or things of that nature in there. Understand when we do community design reviews, it's an architectural role function of the commission, not necessarily the surrounding property. That would be done through a subdivision association or things. So trying to require trees to mitigate architecture is not really a community design review function. in there. The trees are for something else specifically, that's okay. But if it's because these windows are going to be here and all that, well, that's well within their right, as long as they meet the zoning code requirements. When that does come into play, it usually is in a site plan review. Site plan review, when we do it for a residential property, the only time it's involved is that there's deficiencies in the lot. The lot's too narrow, the lot's too shallow, or there's something unique about the lot that triggers a site plan review where the commission should be sensitive and cognizant of how it impacts the surrounding properties in there. And at that point, you're back into the zoning ordinance and you have a broader spectrum beyond just architecture and design to review. It could be about buffering, it could be about noise, it could be about the shade and shadow effect on adjacent properties and in there. When we bring those petitions to you, we always note that, you know, there was a deficiency in a lot width or a lot depth, and therefore, we make sure you're aware of that. So when we do the design review component, you can determine if, well, maybe that, this elevation doesn't deserve any windows because it's 5 feet from the property line and things like of that nature. Go ahead, Carol.
I just want to point out, so that we know what the difference is, but under zoning, our zoning ordinance, you can develop a property as a matter of your right. And you can do that if it meets the specifications for a standard lot in our ordinance. So if you meet that, and you meet all the criteria, then you can do whatever you want. But if your lot, like so many of ours are, is deficient in some way, does not meet that standard, then we have the right to require site plan review. Is that a good explanation?
Now, there's also a component in the ordinance where the commission has the authority, regardless of the lot dimensions or characteristics, to request that they want to conduct a site plan review. And there are, I couldn't specifically call out a reason, but it does happen in there, and the commission, would have that authority.
Roughly, what approximate number of redevelopments occur that don't have to come in front of us?
All the developments will, any new construction would come before the commission, and then for additions, we have different thresholds. So the addition exceeds, especially over 1,200 feet, it's going to come, in there. If it's below, let's say 1,200 square feet, you've entrusted staff to make sure that we review these on taking the guidance of what we've heard from the commission before. And there, in terms of the percentage, it may be that about 40% of the permits we issue you never see, because the additions below that threshold, or even with some pools and flat works, if it's under that threshold, it is. Now, again, if there's deficiencies in the lot, then that changes, and it usually has to come over here in there. So does that answer what you were looking for?
That's perfect. Thank you.
All right. And they're now, again, and then site plan review is required for a majority of the commercial properties, because you do look at what those impacts are with the bufferings and adjacent properties and such. And then you have special permits, and what special permits call out is an additional criteria for review, but then you also are required to do a site plan review. So it kind of works, they keep building on each other. So you got community design, then you got community design and site plan, then you have community design, site plan, special permits. Each one raises the threshold and the level of review and responsibility from the commission. Now, from our end, we try to listen to the commission comments as they come in, and then we tried to guide applicants, saying, well, this has become, this last petition, there was concerns about the slope of the roofs and or things. So we pick up from the commission what some of the priorities are in there, and what are some acceptable means are in there. Like, as we got into really narrow lots, the commission has been more flexible to how to the elevation articulation along the sides in there, and rightly so, because the houses, you're trying not to align windows with windows and things of that nature. But then there are other cues in there, let's say like the materials. There is a specific component in the guidelines that encourages 50% brick. Doesn't say you have to do 50% brick. So it still gives you the flexibility to do a Cape Cod or something with natural, you know, cedar siding or natural siding of some sort. But then it's our responsibility as staff to bring that to your attention, saying, or if they just do a base of brick, it's up to us. Again, it's the responsibility of staff to make sure that you're aware that it's below a specific threshold. Another threshold we have is when a garage projects more than 15 feet. We're supposed to make sure you're aware of that. And then in your decision-making process to make sure that, you know, is it compatible with the surroundings in there and permit it. Again, we take the cues of what the decision process is from the commission. Then when the next petitioner comes that has a similar situation, we make sure that they're aware or bring that to their or, you know, are ready to submit evidence of why things were done specifically one way or the other in there. Remember, the community guidelines do have references to stormwater management, tree preservation in there, but again, they're just solely guidelines in there. To move it to the next level, you actually create some type of regulatory system in place. So for stormwater, we now actually have a stormwater management chapter, and that has specific criteria and thresholds that people have to meet in that process. And I'm not referring to other things, but tree preservation does not. We don't have a tree ordinance in place, but we do encourage, and the commission has the ability to request, preservation for trees or replacement of trees and things of that nature, even to lighting. And that the special permit process, again, you recommend to the council, they have the final say. In there are specific uses that are outlined in the special permit process where there's additional criteria that they have to meet. Like if you have a drive-through, that drive-through window can't face Olive Boulevard. So it's kind of like a code. You just can't do it in there. So they'll have things. And there are some uses that have location requirements, area requirements, like a gasoline service station with a convenience store has to have more than 80,000 square feet, period. If you don't have a site that meets that criteria, then you can't petition or permit for that.
One of the things I like about special permits is that it gives us the flexibility to impose conditions, if you would, that are unique to that particular site. And so we could require, certain hours of operation if the neighborhood is right behind, or other kinds of things, height issues, for instance, if the neighborhoods are over concerned about that in particular. So it gives us a chance to really look at the uniqueness of that particular situation and what it requires to make all the parties compatible, make it work.
Mm-hmm. So, and then as we get in, typically when something comes in and, in the agenda, we'll post what type of reviews, so the public's informed whether something's just community design review or it is community design review and site plan review. When we put the motion together, we'll make sure that the commission acknowledges both of those. And there are some times where we'll separate them because they're clauses in the ordinance that one has to be acknowledged before the other one can be addressed in there. But we're always open to any questions in there, and just want to make sure that the commission has an understanding of its role in there. The document you have for here breaks down this information in there, gives you some of the code sections, and if there are ever any questions or comments on the process or things to be improved, please let us know in there. We want you comfortable up here,
Carlos, do you have this on the website at all?
No,
Because
but we
not
can
only
place it.
for us, but for the public, when they trying to understand what these different reviews are, it might be good if they have a reference where they could go look at. You do a great job kind of explaining, but sometimes I think they might want to,
Mhm.
especially if it's really stressful, not stressful, but
Complicated.
complicated, controversial, things like that, so they could kind of help follow along.
All right. We'll make sure.
Helps us keep straight what we're doing,
Yeah, absolutely.
which review we're doing and why.
Understand?
It's confusing.
Yeah, Mr. Waller.
Carlos, if I understood you correctly, the site plan is only applicable for non-conforming properties. Is that right?
Anytime that there is a non-conforming property, it is required
Okay,
in there. But then there are other uses or other zoning districts that require it regardless
okay.
as part of that process.
For the non-conforming properties, does the element that's non-conforming have to be related to the thing that they want to do on the property?
It's rare that we'll see something that would be unique. Let's say if you have a majority of our reviews are going to be residential, probably about 75%. And let's say if you have a narrow lot with an existing house and they're putting an addition in there, that that would require the site plan review, and we typically wouldn't do an assessment of the structure as a whole. It would be kind of focused on the addition in there. I'm not sure if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, it is. I
Yeah.
was just wondering
Yeah.
if you have to do a site plan if it's not conforming, even if what they're petitioning to do doesn't have anything to do with the reason why it's non-conforming.
I would look at it that I would have to have something pretty compelling to say, well, if you're going to do this, you're going to have to resolve this, I'll call it nonconformity or an issue with something detached from the house. I think that they'd have to be a strong relation with those two. Now, a lot of the codes do say that, like, if you exceed 50% of your assessed value, then everything's up for review. But if you looked at the true assessed value, I mean, you're talking in the hundreds of thousands, but if to get that.
Assessed value of the entire property?
That's where it gets really vague, but so if you're looking at a $400,000 house, you really have to be doing a pretty big improvement to get past
Right.
that. So, and there are some cases, stormwater becomes really tricky because it could be that the area of the property has no issues or is on the upside, but it's all that downside or problems that the neighboring property owner has experienced in the past. If some of those issues should be remedied in there, even though they're not directly related. That happens every once in a while, and we have that discussion with the commission. Sometimes we don't know in there, so I look for some guidance to see, or in this case, if they could talk it out and come up to some solution.
Okay, thank you, Carlos.
Any other questions or comments from Carlos?
Paul, anything you want to chime in or? All right.
Yeah, I think it's very handy. In fact, I'm gonna make a photocopy of it myself.
And that's one of the things we've never, with our recent changes in the city as a whole, never had a discussion about onboarding, and that's becoming a bigger term now. And four of the members here are within the past 3 years or right around COVID. And again, if there is information or resources you need or things, let us know. I mean, and we value your opinions in the process. Each one of you bring a different perspective and a strength, and we want you to chime in and participate in those discussions. We also don't want you to always agree with us. It's one of the things, because then that, I think for me, it's always a challenge, in there, and it's good. That's what makes things interesting and all that, because once it becomes, they're going to approve it, this is, you start losing, the effectiveness of the review process. So.
Good. All right, Carlos, we don't take public comments on these items. These are
We're just having
for
discussion.
Yeah.
It's up to the chairman. I'd say president has been.
Yeah. Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, under special permits, you've got comp plan review, and I think you might want to change that to comp plan.
Yes. Yeah.
You're welcome.
And we'll do something a little bit more illustrated for the website on there. So agree. Thank you, Carl.
Yeah, good. Okay. Then we'll move on to item B, discussion on bamboo regulations under chapter 445, urban agriculture.
All right, Chairman, I do have Mr. Martin here to help us in the discussion, but just to kind of give you a quick overview. This was a directive from council earlier this year about eliminating portions of our bamboo regulations that are part of the urban agricultural chapter 445 in there. So when that was passed, I went and I proposed some changes to the commission back in June, I believe it was. And there was some questions about that process and some references in the code. I was removing a section that was referenced by a section that was going to stay in. And there was a reference to that. And there was some concerns about that, but it led to two things. One is, one, how best to amend this, the bamboo regulations in accordance to the council's wills. Then the second thing was to just kind of have a discussion with, while Mr. Martin is here, is about the process of text amendments and ordinances in there. First, we'll talk about the bamboo, but afterwards, just so the commission has an understanding of who writes what.
Good.
Hi, everybody. Nice to be back.
It's good to have you, Paul.
The first thing, I mean, one of the topics that's within your purview are text amendments. And since we're talking about a text amendment, I thought I'd just take a minute, talk a little bit about that. Especially for those of you who haven't been around or who might have gotten become out of touch with these kinds of issues. But pretty basic stuff. City council passes the laws, right? Only the city council can pass the laws, including the zoning code. The PCDC's role in looking at text amendments like we have today are to review those amendments and make recommendations to the council about what they think about it. And in doing that, PCDC really plays an integral role in fashioning what those ordinances are going to look like. And sometimes the council agrees with those completely. Sometimes the council thinks that they need to be revised in a different way, but that's the process. And that's what the process is all about, is getting your input so that the council can make as an informed decision as possible about what the zoning code should be. And finally, in case y'all don't know, the Board of Adjustment is the other player in land use decisions. And the Board of Adjustment is there basically to adjudicate issues where a strict application of the existing zoning code imposes a hardship on a property owner for some reason or another. And it's almost always related to topography of the lot. So if you have a pie-shaped lot and somebody wants to build a house, and because of the pie shape can't fit in with the frontage requirements or the setback requirements, then they go to the Board of Adjustment and say, look, this is my lot. This is the only way I can functionally build on this lot is if you give me a variance, an exception to the zoning code. And that's what Board of Adjustment does. Now, a lot of people go to Board of Adjustment and they ask for variances when they shouldn't. I think Carlos does a really good job trying to keep that to a minimum, but still sometimes they want to bull ahead, and the variances that they're requesting are appropriate because they're either self-created or they have nothing to do with the lot. It's a personal thing, like, you know, I want my pool to be a little bit closer to my house or a little bit farther away from my house, whatever it is. But that's what Board of Adjustment does. So on the urban agriculture chapter, we seems like a long time ago. Those of you who are here know that we spent a lot of time on this chapter, and it was a very serious challenge, or a very significant challenge, I should say. It includes coverages of livestock, which chickens, rabbits, things of that nature, even bees, horticulture for folks who would like to have a prairie style yard, things of that nature, and bamboo. because bamboo was a problem and apparently remains a problem of some sort. So we put all that together over several months, it seems to me, and then the council looked at it and tweaked it some more, and we came up with what we have. And this chapter here, urban agriculture, I really thought was a very creative and good response to all of these issues. And we seem to be doing okay with bees and with horticulture and other livestock. I do not know exactly what the concern with the bamboo was, and perhaps that is something that I should have been paying more attention to a few months ago. But this seems to me that the ordinance still pretty much works. All right, and that's my own perspective, and I'm willing to be educated on it. The suggestion that section B be removed from the bamboo section of the chapter, I appreciate what the goal might have been, but when you take that out, it affects everything else. And especially in that particular section, 445-080 and 445-090. So it is really a matter of, it's not a simple matter. You can't simply extricate paragraph B and have that ordinance still stand. You got to figure out what the heck you're going to do with bamboo. Without having a better idea of the exact problems with the application of the bamboo ordinance. And by the way, I'm happy to, please, if you have questions or comments that can help educate me, don't hesitate. All right. But other things that you might think about. I mean, what the existing thing does is it prohibits new bamboo and it regulates existing bamboo to the extent it tries to curb intrusion onto other people's property, or onto the city's right of way, or onto private rights of way. One way we might want to think about or take a look at is prohibiting new bamboo and considering the possibility of having a trespass prosecution for invasive bamboo. So you have a property owner that is wants their bamboo, but allows an incursion of bamboo either into a right of way or onto somebody else's property. Send them to municipal court and prosecute them for trespass. And the judge can take the option of, okay, you can abate the bamboo or I'm fining you. And if they don't abate the bamboo, they get fined, and then the violation still exists, so they can get charged again. That's one possibility. And I'm not saying that I've thought this out, but something we could look at if that's the direction that folks want to go in. Another direction is to prohibit new bamboo. By the way, when I say prohibit new bamboo, I don't know how you enforce that. Okay, you would have to have proof that someone didn't have bamboo and then they planted the bamboo. And I don't know enough about bamboo to figure out if you know, do you need pictures? Do you need just the circumstances of the situation? How do you prosecute that or enforce it if you want to? That's a hard question. So getting back to my third option, prohibit new bamboo and just ignore the problem. I mean, if it is invasive and it gets onto private property, that's the private property's owner right. The private property's owner has a right to bring an action against the invader as a nuisance and try to get the judge to agree with them, try to get the bamboo ordered to be eradicated, try to recover their court costs, but keep it between the private parties. You know, I suppose that was always an issue, and part of what prompted this legislation was a desire to try to address that issue and try to help when neighbors did have problems like this. The only other comment I have about the whole thing is that, you know, the government can't solve everybody's problems. I mean, I think the ordinance attempts to address a problem. But, you know, it can't be incumbent upon the government or on the city more specifically, to follow this process on a month by month or year by year basis. At some point, you know, the ordinance calls for the abatement of work according to plans approved by the director. And if that happens, and it seems the problem seems to be solved, you know, I think the city would be more than justified in saying, look, we've done what we could, that's it. And then leave it to the property owners to figure out. But that's not a terribly helpful solution, I know, but it is a solution, and it's based on the fact that, again, we can't do everything. Yeah. So those are my thoughts on the whole thing. Be happy to listen to y'all.
So is it enforcement? Is that the reason why this code's not working, or is that the problem I'm hearing?
I do not know what the problem was.
Okay.
Wait, yeah, well, maybe later, okay, but not right now. Let's continue our discussion that we have here. Go ahead, Carol.
So, Carlos, maybe you could answer the same question. It's been a while since I've really thought about this, but could you explain to us again why council wants us to consider removing that section?
It was from a discussion at the council level. I couldn't tell you
Well,
specifically.
why is it that you're recommending?
I would refer that to the liaison, I think would be.
It is an enforcement issue. And I'll give a potential example because Mr. Martin, I think I heard something that was like, well, we'll attempt to get the parties to resolve the issue. And then when we say, yes, it's been resolved, and then the bamboo continues to grow and it goes back into the other party's property, then that party wants to continuously come back to the city as its enforcement mechanism. And that's difficult. I mean, you've got people doing whatever they do to reflect that they're attempting to stop the encroachment. But my understanding, depending upon how you look at bamboo, because some people love it because it ends up being a wonderful barrier and creates privacy, and others say it just continues to grow and take over on other people's property. So, you know, how does the city resolve that issue? You know, that really is a private property to private property issue. And that's the conclusion that I'm understanding the council came to is, we can't enforce the constant, you've let it spread. You need to do this again. And it constantly comes back to the city. That's my understanding of the fact that the enforcement mechanism is should not be on the onus of the city.
Go ahead, Carol.
So I've seen one of the neighbors who had bamboo, and she's been using a technique called solarization to eradicate all the bamboo on her lot. Okay. It seems to be working. And I would be curious, because I don't know the answer to this question, but somebody who knows more about bamboo might, but if you've got somebody who has a lot of bamboo or some bamboo on their lot, why could we require solarizing strips around the edge of their property, inside their own property, to keep the bamboo from migrating to their neighbors? I mean, that's the problem. If you're an individual and you want your lot to be full of bamboo, have at it. But it's when it travels to the neighbors' lots uncontrolled that we seem to be having a real issue. So I'm thinking, well, if we require, the solarization will work and it will help keep the bamboo from spreading. Maybe wherever we have existing bamboo, we should require a solarizing strip around the outside of their lot.
But that might be anecdotal, like, cause I think it still comes to the same problem as we could require it, but if it encroaches, what is the enforcement of it? Is the challenge. And I guess one of the things I wanted to clarify is I understand the council wanting this stripped for the reasons that they're mentioning. What I interpreted from your comments was you think it's fine the way it is. Is that, did I read that right, or?
Well, yeah, sort of, but that's my cynical approach to life. I mean,
Alright.
I will tell you, you know, the city has so many things to worry about. You have to make decisions about what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. I don't have a problem whatsoever with the city saying, look, we tried. It's on you now. We're not going to pursue this anymore. You know, this constant need to have the government solve your problem is what I'm railing against.
And I understand, I guess one of the things I'd ask back to the city then is you mentioned like, they keep coming back, How is that different than, and maybe it is, but different than the noise ordinance? Or you say it's two people need to work it out, but I think the city does have conversations around, you know, we've talked about noise, we've talked about smell, we've talked about, you know, all the things you could be. Some things we're willing to enforce, some things we're not, is tough. You know, why this versus that? Arguing both sides, I'm just kind of, it's the challenge. You know?
That was my question also. And I'm not sure, what is it about this particular situation that causes friction between neighbors as opposed to noise, which causes friction between.
Or we might get called over and over again too.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
I
If your
think-
kids are noisy and every Saturday night they cause, you know, to cause a problem, keep me up all night. You know, I gotta call the police, and they do it every week, because every Saturday night they're noisy. I don't know that I see it as being any different.
I think too, the complications with this is that there's no set mitigation, you know, procedure for it. It seems to be very evasive, you know, for sure, and it tends to, you try to do something and there's no guarantees. that-
Policy is driven by an action, a reaction, something happening or something not happening. And, you know, the bamboo and the chickens and the other issues came to the council's attention. There was extensive back and forth amongst council.
How do,
And as a result, this product was the final product that ended up being accepted and implemented. And, you know, sometimes best practices after you implement, you end up with the problem of the true inability to deal with enforcement. You ask, you work, you attempt to resolve. And sometimes you got to take another look at things, and this is one of those things that council believes we need to take another look at with regard to the enforcement matter. If there's new practices, if there's new ways of dealing with it, you know, the solar strip, whatever your neighbor is doing, then, you know, perhaps what we need to begin to be doing is providing those, you know, best practices. Because, you know, in our conversations, and you all know my thumbs are not green, in our conversations, you know, one council member did what was required of what you do for bamboo so that it doesn't spread. And that was what the requirements were, you know, back in the day. And you have others where the wind can blow and next thing you know, you've got a bamboo plant growing in somebody else's yard. So again, it is the difficulty of being able to deal with enforcement of a violation between two neighbors that would continue to go on and on and on. And that is an example of real situations.
Just a quick question, because you just talked about airborne migration of it. It's my understanding that it's not airborne. It grows by the root structure. And correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think you're correct.
So,
I'm not,
Go
I
for
don't
it.
know.
yeah.
I'm also curious how neighboring communities have it in their laws. What do they do?
I do not have the faintest idea that anybody else does have it.
Maplewood
but-
U City doesn't, I'm just curious. 'Cause
I
that's
do-
interesting.
I do know that when the commission was drafting the ordinance, and also the council was involved at that time. Several drafts of, or several references from other communities were provided in the process. I couldn't tell you, but I know Ladue was in the process of having theirs in effect and all that. And that it was very helpful in the process. What we did not know was how was it being enforced or how was it being handled for pre-existing conditions. And that makes a big difference, because to me, I think it was, it's been a while since June, and it's been even a longer while since, the issue about how this segment of the code it's a well drafted ordinance in there, and it's been effective, except for two events, not just the bamboo, but urban agriculture as a whole. The easier one is to refer you to a rooster. We had this rooster, and we spent months trying to find housing for this rooster without having to, eliminate the rooster in the process. But it was worth that balance and all that. All the other, since then we haven't had the rooster, all the other chickens have been well behaved. The same with the bees and all that. A majority of the bamboos, no issues. But in the situation where the ordinance was put, where the existing conditions were far above what this was, that made it a lot more complicated. And I couldn't tell you what other community had been done. So it would be like all of a sudden, the chairman pro tem saying, hey, all commissioners need to wear red shirts. I'm going to be scrambling trying to find you guys red shirts if it had to happen. And that was the situation we were kind of placed in. And so it didn't become just an issue of enforcement, but it also became an issue of cooperation to get everybody to work towards the same goal. And there, I'll reserve what I'll say and all that. The experience was not good. And on both parties, they will give you, every story has three views, three sides. Theirs, the others, and what you heard in there. And I think the application of this in a situation that's already gone far beyond, what the intent of this is difficult in there, because it wasn't no longer about preventative measures or nixing this right at the start. There were 5 years plus in there, and there is no way I can tell you from my staff or the city that we could mitigate this issue without cooperation on both sides.
And it's not like the staff has expertise
No.
in bamboo.
Just like the gentleman did with the pool issue. He worked things out with his neighbor.
Right.
In a different situation, but neighbor to
Mr. Martin, I've got some comments on the text itself, but before I go into that, maybe this is because of my legal background and I'm a hammer, so everything I look at looks like a nail, but this seems like a situation where a private cause of action between neighbors makes sense, like on the
Oh, absolutely.
nuisance claim that you're mentioning there. If you don't like
Absolutely.
it, you sue your neighbor.
Yes.
I assume the issue with that is that it's cost prohibitive to sue your neighbor for bamboo. The damages are never gonna reach what your attorney's fees are unless you took it to small claims court. Would that
Right.
be a fair assessment? Okay.
Well, I've Thankfully, I haven't been in the situation, but I'm assuming, making the same assumption.
Plus the bamboo's coming up through someone's floorboards, probably it's not gonna, the damages aren't gonna reach that level. So, so that may not be a realistic way of resolving this. Beyond that, I'm confused about the proposed changes here, and I know you didn't make the proposed changes, but I'd like to get your feedback on sort of the way I read it, to see if you read it the same way that I do.
I don't see how it works.
Yeah, so B1, removing that just removes the obligation for a register, I guess, of pre-existing bamboo. Which
Right.
I don't know if that matters one way or not. I don't know if that's being kept up to date in any way. Removing item 2 there, item 2 defines the areas that are restricted from having bamboo. Which then in the new language down there, it says in the new B1, if any bamboo intrudes into an area restricted by section 445.080B, that's the section references there don't make sense anymore. So restricted area would have to be defined in a new section there, or maybe kept in. And then removing 3, this is sort of a tattletale provision, I guess. Your neighbor is allowed to inform the city that there's a violation, and that sort of triggers the enforcement action by the department if they want to. I see it removed here, but hypothetically, if someone's bamboo came up in a restricted area on my property and I called the city, even if this provision isn't in here, the city would still have to act, right? The city can't
Well,
just
the city-
ignore it.
City never really has to act. And
Wow.
they can't ignore it. They can't, but, and it goes back a while, but the purpose of B3 really was to have some kind of trigger for the city getting involved. And we spelled it out. If you didn't have this and somebody complained about it, probably the same result would occur. If we're going to try to regulate pre-existing bamboo.
Is there any risk to the city if it doesn't act on it?
No.
No risk.
It's like people speeding up and down Olive Road. You can't get them all. You know, you get to pick and choose who you want to get.
Okay.
Your turn.
So I'm wondering if a neighboring property owner objects to a bamboo intrusion, instead of us saying that, okay, the city itself will take action, would some kind of an alternative remedy or penalty be more appropriate? Like the neighbors, the one with the bamboo without, and the bamboo sufferer be required to mediate situation in municipal court or through municipal court or something like that, so that the onus isn't on Carlos's people to go out and enforce it. But if I'm a property owner and my neighbor's growing bamboo and encroaches on my property, I have a solution is how to go forward and how to rectify the situation.
Yep, we didn't think about that before. I don't recall it coming up, but in retrospect, it seems to me, and I would have to check the trespass ordinance, but it seems to me to be pretty much a classic trespass. And you are allowing your property to essentially get onto someone else's property and causing a problem. That's a trespass. It's the same as if you walk across the boundary line and pull up their bushes. I mean,
So let me bring up, and forgive me here, but I'm gonna bring this up because this is the phone call I get a lot. The neighbor's tree is hanging over my yard. I can't cut it down. It's not mine, you know?
it's not true. You can't cut it down.
No, that's what they say. That's
Yeah,
what they say. That's
Yeah.
what they say. And then I say, no, if it's on your side, you can cut off what's on your side. And then it's the conversations, what is my neighbor gonna do? Is my neighbor gonna sue? What if I hurt the tree? So all I'm really bringing up to that point is, it's neighbor, neighbor. Can you work it out and resolve it? Or if you need to, my thought is, you've got St. Louis County, civil courts, small claims. And the other issue is this, from what I understand, I've never really been privy to the total facts, is that when this first came up, there was a lot of money spent in an effort to do what would remove off of a property, but continued to grow. And then the interactions between the neighbor of your land, my land, you put this here, you put that there, those are issues that are above and beyond in my view of the ability to deal with enforcement.
Well,
And
I think what Carol is saying is it takes it away from the city. It
Well,
puts it-
I agree to let it go to the county, but.
I mean, we have neighbor versus neighbor issues. I mean, we all do. I mean, that's, and some of them are harder to deal with than others. So one of the things that I think in many ways we should consider is some form of all of that municipal neighbor to neighborhood mediation process. That would, yes, Paul's laughing. Yeah. Yeah. No, but it's not, but I don't know, it has to be a formal mediation like what the bar association would talk about, but some process where we can work these things out. And maybe, we have
I'm gonna
somebody-
defend the city here
somebody-
right now. The city did attempt to do that.
But I'm saying, but maybe that's not the city's best role.
And I understand, but you're kind of asking that. When you say, neighborhood mediation. Who's
Well-
doing that mediation? The city.
And there's no enforcement. I mean, if people can't agree on their own, I don't think any third party that has no enforcement will probably get them. I understand what you're saying, but I'm afraid it's.
There's a lot of potential conflict of interests with people knowing people who are on this committee, too, so.
If the council, it sounds like the council's knows what they want. I guess Carlos, we recommend to the council, right?
Mhm.
But the council decides ultimately. I don't think we have a strong recommendation either way. I mean, we all. have
I'm
different
kind of
opinions.
intrigued by the trespassing, way, and I was, I think that might, I'm not
And then,
sure how.
is it a one-time thing though, that if, assuming you need to look at it, I know that, but like, if we say, okay, it's trespassing, or we put that in there, the city's out of it at that point then, and it's like, then they can take it further, or is it still fall back where we have to keep citations all the time?
And then those citations, they come to our court because they're our citations.
And this is from the police that would give these citations or code enforcement?
It probably would be court enforcement in there, because I don't think, again, from my perspective, we're probably gonna know bamboo about the same, what it looks like.
Right.
I don't think they're gonna be any more expertise in terms of looking at the bamboo than we would.
But
On
you
the
could
building.
trespass somebody? I guess that's my question.
That becomes the question we'll have to ask and take a look at. I'm not sure.
Okay.
If Paul, I'm not sure I understand what would make bamboo a trespass violation as opposed to leaves blowing from my yard to my neighbor's yard or
Well,
seedlings
that's-
growing. I mean, I'm not, how does one distinguish?
Theoretically. Your leaves falling under your neighbor's yard would also be a trespass, I think. But that's almost impossible to prove. I've got leaves from my entire neighborhood in my yard, and my leaves are in other people's yards. So you can't, you just can't prove where the leaves come from. With the bamboo, as I understand it, it's a network of a root system, and if it, you can pretty much identify the root system and where it comes from. So if it comes, if your neighbor has bamboo and there's no other bamboo around, and all of a sudden you've got bamboo coming up on your property, it seems like that's where it's coming from. And I assume that can be proven. I do not know the answer to that.
Yeah, and I recall there was some discussion like bamboo has to be intentionally planted, in there as opposed to honeysuckle, which, that can grow anywhere, whether it was your neighbors or not, that could easily happen in there. But the bamboo is not native to Missouri, and it's because somebody, if you have it, is because somebody planted, either you planted it or somebody near you intentionally planted it.
What if somebody had a tree root that grew, the trees in their yard, and the tree root by chance grows somehow into the neighbor's property and damages the foundation or damages a deck or something like that?
Yeah.
How would that get resolved?
Well, who knows how it would get resolved? I would tell you that if that happens, I've seen that happen before, and it was many years ago, and I forgot what the resolution was. But the bottom line really is that it is the other property owners, the owner of the tree, it's their responsibility. I believe that's how it was resolved. I think their insurance company got involved and paid to fix the problem. I didn't mean to laugh at your suggestion of mediation. It's just that
Yes, you did.
we've got a couple, I couldn't help it. We've got a couple of neighbors here in town that are at it hammer and tongs, and it's been quiet for a while, but there is no way these people would ever sit in the same room together, let alone have a constructive conversation. So, and that's unfortunately where those issues lie. I kind of like the trespass idea. I mean, it's very similar to what you said about noise. I mean, if you got a problem with noise, you call the police. If the police can verify the noise or want to pursue the action, they can write a ticket and go to municipal court and get resolved that way. Hopefully through repetition, if that's an issue, then the problem gets resolved. This might be similar. I do not know frankly, how often that would need to be pursued, but if you could establish that there is a trespass, if you could prove that bamboo came from your neighbor, if the city could prove that the bamboo came from the neighbor, then you would have a case for municipal court, and you could pursue that. And as I say, what happens in those kinds of situations, almost invariably, it's like any kind of code enforcement situation, the property owner is given an opportunity to fix the problem, and that can take a while depending on exactly what the problem is. But if the property owner ultimately fixes the problem, the case is dismissed and they don't have any kind of conviction or anything. And if the property owner doesn't fix the problem, then you have a trial and presumably there's a conviction. And if the property owner is just flat out refusing to fix the problem, you can file another charge against him. And if the property owner is a real recalcitrant person, you can actually, I mean, the trespass is ongoing. It's a day-to-day thing. You can file a case for every single day that goes by. So, and I wouldn't recommend that. I've been there and that's not fun either. It's really a pain in the butt for staff to have to worry about multiple prosecutions, but it might be a more feasible solution to the problem that we have. And I also want to say that I was dismissive about the notion that the city can just turn a blind eye to things, especially when you have an ordinance. That's almost impossible to do, and that was flippant on my part. So I do agree that with a demand to continually come back and solve a problem, that puts a lot of stress on staff and on the administration. And while you could turn and walk away from it and just say, look, we're not going to do it. That's not very satisfactory to anyone, least of all the homeowner who's looking for some help. So with that clarification.
Well, you, go ahead, Carol.
So I like the idea of making it a trespass issue as a possible solution as opposed to a city, just a regular code enforcement issue. It takes it away from the worst of the burden off of your staff, which I think is part of the idea here. It gives us a way.
But it's shifting the burden from one to the other.
Exactly.
Right. But then you're
No.
not involved with the remediation
With the resolution. Right,
and mitigating that.
right.
It becomes more performance based.
Right.
Where is it fixed or is it not?
It's either a yes or it's a no.
Right.
It's not a law enforcement issue, folks. You don't bring your police in because of plants growing into somebody else's yard.
I mean, I understand it's not, but it's also, you could argue it's not a court issue. You could also, it gets there because people cannot talk civilly.
Well, it's a county court, small claims court issue, not a municipal issue. That's my responsibility.
It was a pretty small item for small
I
claims.
don't disagree.
I mean, that's not a reasonable solution.
Are you aware of any claims like this being brought at the county level? At the circuit court level?
Any nuisance claims?
Any claims like a bamboo claim like this? Like, I'm wondering, we're saying we don't want to do it at the municipal level. Thing is, we have some level of control over what happens in our municipality. We don't have any impact on St. Louis County or St. Louis City or any other circuit court. So I'm
Well-
wondering, is this the type of thing that a court like that would
I'm
take
not-
up and adjudicate in
Sure.
in
mean-
favor of the neighbor who's bringing it? I mean, or
Yeah, if one neighbor is suing the other neighbor, court would have to weigh in and make a decision.
are you aware of them ever weighing in favor of the neighbor bringing a claim like that? I understand.
I'm
that,
not
you know,
aware
at
of
the
any
top your
claim
head,
like
but-
that. And I don't mean to suggest that they don't exist. I just have not had the
Sure.
experience of being involved in a claim like that. But I did represent some people on a tree issue. Exactly what was described. The tree was hanging over this gentleman's driveway, and the part of the tree limbs were dead, and he wanted to trim the tree back to the property line. He was really worried about it. And I said, no, you can do that. And he said, well, my neighbor says he's going to sue me. I said, well, I'll write the neighbor a letter. And I wrote him a letter and said, he's got every right to do this. And you've already dropped, 4 limbs on his cars and leading to a bunch of damage that he hasn't asked you to pay. And if you give him a hard time, we're going to come after you. And that didn't go any further, but those kinds of situations do exist. And I believe that if they go to an extreme level and people can't resolve those issues on their own, yeah, that's what courts are for.
So I have a general question, because, I'm not in that field, but how does it differ between municipal and then going to the county? How would that change?
Well, I think there might be some confusion in what we're talking about.
Okay,
This ordinance is for local government regulation enforcement to the extent that we can make it happen.
Okay.
It's the government getting involved and representing, not really representing, but trying to resolve the trespass incursion on behalf of the neighbor who is getting the bamboo, on the unwanted bamboo. What we're talking about when we go to county court, it's a private action. One neighbor is suing the other neighbor, asking the judge to basically declare that the neighbor's property is a nuisance and it's damaging their property, and that they want damages for the damage. I want the problem eradicated and they want damages that they have suffered. That's what we're talking about when we say go to county.
Okay, thank you.
So as sort of a practical matter, one option would be saying, we're not going to do anything about this at all. If somebody comes to us and says, we have a problem with our neighbor at the Bamboo, our response is, you're free to bring a claim against your neighbor in St. Louis County Court, but
Yeah.
the municipality involved is not going to do
Yeah, I
anything
guess
about
this
it.
is, no good deed goes unpunished. We're trying to solve that problem without, taking the position that this is a completely private dispute and you've got to resolve it on your own.
Curious with Daniel, since you had this experience yourself. Do you have any thoughts on this?
I mean, it's one of those things where, the original owner who had planted the bamboo had moved, and then somebody else buys the property and it's already spread by that point, it's like, how do you prove who planted it and they could be long gone? I mean,
I don't think the planting of it is really important. I mean, the fact is that you buy into the problem. If it's pre-existing and you buy the house and it has the problem in the backyard and then you don't solve the problem. But your question does raise an interesting thought, and perhaps we can require amortization of the bamboo when the property is sold. I mean, you have to get rid of it when you sell the property. I have no idea if we can do that, but it's an interesting thought.
So we're having this very issue in our neighborhood. And when we had our trustee meeting for our neighborhood, this bamboo was one of the topics because there is a rental house with the owner living in California that doesn't really care. And the bamboo is taken over half of the side yard, and it is currently encroaching the neighbors and everyone who lives in that little section. It was complaining about it 2 weeks ago when we had the meeting. And so this is like what can be done? Well, we're like, nothing really. It's like their yard. So it's good to hear this discussion. Be interesting to see, what can come of it.
Yeah, and I hate to complicate things, but it's not, generally speaking, these are private nuisances. One property is affecting another property. At some point, at some level, it can go beyond one property and start to devalue neighboring properties, plural. At that point, it's not inconceivable that you could say this is a public nuisance, and then the city could then step in and file suit against the owner and perhaps pursue other remedies like, spending public money to take down the bamboo and eradicate the problem and go into their property, take care of the problem. I mean, we kind of have that in this ordinance. But
That was part of the discussion we had as a neighborhood was, okay, there's 10 houses that have complained about it. And the owner in California is like, yeah, okay. And we've reached out to that property owner and they're like, yeah, okay. And and he told the president of the trustee, he started citing case law from California. And we're like, okay, that's great. That's California. Like that has no impact. And we got nowhere with the owner. So
What did the case law indicate? Do you remember?
I don't
But it was in
like,
favor of him.
yeah,
Okay.
that it's his property. He can basically do what he wants with it.
well, that's a hard question.
Chairman, should we maybe have council look at trespass and come back I think we're not voting on anything, it's a discussion.
No, well, I think it's more for, Paul to look at.
Sorry,
Yeah,
counsel,
and-
lawyer.
Yeah, and more kind of is there alternatives to getting the police involved? Where it could still be sort of a,
Well, this really wouldn't be a police matter. I mean, it'd
Right.
be it would be code enforcement.
okay.
Code enforcement officer would issue a ticket just like it would be any other code violation.
And then I guess if there's any other options that would be, helpful, like what Carol was saying, to go to, direct them to something,
Mhm.
to help with that.
And I am curious if there's anything, any of the neighboring, have just
Yeah.
an idea.
We haven't looked at that for quite a while. We can.
I wouldn't look at California case laws.
Yeah. If I remember, when this was going through, lots of people were crafting new.
Yeah, I remember that, because around, especially around bees and
Bees
ants.
and chickens, I mean.
We were all over the bees and chickens.
Right, it was the bees and the chickens that had a lot of banter back and forth, as well as, I heard earlier, yes, we're beyond the 60 days. We've already sent notices with regards to those that have pre-existing. We've already created the map of knowing who's pre-existing. I'm not a lawyer, but I was like, okay, if you're uncomfortable with us, then, B is just pre-existing bamboo that may be maintained by the owner, provided that it doesn't intrude. And if it does, best practices and go take them to court. But
And maybe we should have something in there that say, your bamboo cannot trespass onto another neighbor's property.
The ordinance in itself is very clear of that. But once the bamboo has encroached and has encroached for a period of time, the abatement process, can be effective, but you can't abate bamboo solely on the bamboo property owner's property, because if it already spread, then it requires mitigation on the other person's property. So there has to be that cooperation. And my understanding, as getting educated on bamboo over time, is that spread continues for 5 years. You got to continue to eradicate, not just in where the source was, but on the adjacent property for 5 years. That requires 5 years of cooperation between the two property owners to ensure it's fully eradicated. If they're not cooperating, or they're always, or for whatever reason, it's not going to work. And the process of the enforcement or the code enforcement officer, or even myself, that's not our training to be able to mitigate in that. In there. So again, I think the ordinance, holistically is written very well. It's just the complexity of this bamboo.
Work.
Yeah, because you have to get.
It seems to me that what we're saying is that mitigating this on a municipal level doesn't work. But that doesn't mean necessarily that we should make it okay. I'm still thinking that if we have pre-existing bamboo and it's encroaching, that it becomes a trespass violation. And and then we get, the neighbors can go from there and follow the normal trespass procedure. I'm just not sure. We've got the problem, and taking it out of this ordinance altogether isn't gonna make the problem go away. It's just gonna say, okay, we've got a problem and we don't have a solution for it yet.
Well, but to me, in this, being frank,
Kicking the ball.
we created this a specific problem adopting the ordinance in the middle of this. Again, Commissioner Ragsdale kind of referenced a property on Queensbrook. I haven't heard about, or I'm not aware of a neighbor calling me saying bamboo is encroaching into my property. Would you, look into that, this chapter and that puts the steps in place. Now, if that encroachment has been happening for 10 years, then I'm going to be back in the same situation as with this, that means they're going to have to cooperate for 5 years of mitigating bamboo on both sides until it's completely gone. And it can't be, you have to do it on the other person's property.
So is that language that, so here's another question. Let me play devil's in the detail. So is that the language that if you say you don't want this removed, we have to add language that the neighbors, both impacted, must be willing to cooperate and consistently cooperate for the mitigation of it?
How do you enforce
I
that?
mean, I hear you, but
And
I'm
that's,
just asking the question. Because it requires, as described, cooperation between the neighbors.
If
Well-
that is the only way to resolve the problem, then yeah, we'd have to say that. And,
I mean,
but I think that becomes an issue for trespass in the courts. It's not necessarily a municipal issue to resolve. But, I mean, we've got the issue. Taking it out of this ordinance isn't gonna make that issue go away. It's just gonna sweep it under the rug. And I don't think we resolve anything. It just takes the headache off of Carlos's shoulders, sort of. But.
well,
Yeah,
we need to do some-
look at some other options as a way to resolve it.
Why
And
don't we take a little time and do a little thinking about it, do a little research, see if we can't find out what other communities are doing and come back with a more of a more information.
Paul, I would
We'll
also,
go from there. I will say this, though, I don't think we foresaw when we went through this and passed this ordinance, this ongoing problem of eradication and how it takes years to eradicate. Everybody, at least I was thinking at the time, you dig it up, you put down a barrier, you're done. It's over with. But that assumption apparently is wrong, and that makes, and I know I'm kind of waffling a little bit, but after this discussion, I can more clearly understand what the problem is. And it's that ongoing commitment to resolving the issue. And that's where the public, the government, it's an almost impossible thing to do. So,
when you do research the other municipalities, I would encourage you to.
yeah,
to-
that's
to-
going to be part of it.
No,
Yeah.
no, to also find out what their experience is with it. Since this is so new, they might be running through similar issues that we're dealing with. Because they might have an enforcement, listed on their regulations, but they might be having the same things. That
Yeah.
It'd be good to see if they have any.
Yeah,
Reads
maybe
ours, and I think it's a good answer. And then
Yeah,
Maybe the answer is just to prohibit it entirely and say people who've got it, got to get rid of it within 5 years or whatever.
right.
I don't know.
Okay.
We'll do a little work and get back to you.
Good. Thank
Alright.
you. And
Thank you, Paul.
sir, I know you have a question or comments, but what we're discussing right now doesn't really allow us to do that, but if you want to send an email, with some thoughts or comments to that would be great. Would that? Yeah, okay, here's what we'll do. No, here's what we'll do.
He's gonna talk, I want him up on. Could you please, so we can hear what he's saying?
I'm gonna bring him up for public comments at the end. Okay, we'll do it at the end. Okay, so we can kind of get through some of these other items. All right. Because that's usually how we do things, either public comments at the beginning, but sometimes we've done public comments at the end. So this will stay within how we do things. And I understand that you didn't realize you didn't have a chance to speak to that. And I wasn't clear on that in the instructions. So we'll do, because otherwise you would have had general comments. Right? You would have been up here. No, we'll do the.
I apologize. I was at the general comments, things that were on the agenda.
And that's.
And if there was specific comments I had specific to the bamboo ordinance.
I'm sorry, that was my fault. That was purely my fault, because that's exactly what I said. But then I was clarified by Carlos that this is the opportunity. So we'll do the we'll do another round to get that. All right.
And Chairman and Chairman Pro Tem, if you don't mind, I do have the chief here to kind of go over some safety regulations that I'd like to do in a closed type of session format. So I apologize, but if we can go ahead and get to those comments, the general public comments, that way then the chief,
Okay.
without having to ask him to leave to come back. Sorry about that.
No worries.
But
no
that the
worries.
comments are limited to 3 feet and they're just comments.
Yeah.
I had a prepared speech.
Remember to state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Kent Bach. I live 700 North Price Road. And in case no one knows, I have a neighbor with bamboo. I'm going to deviate from what I prepared because based on the discussions I've heard, I heard a lot about neighbor cooperation. And I guess here's my point. If you want to adjust this ordinance, focus on containment, not mitigation. Because precisely, here's our issue. As it's written right now, the ordinance is very good. It says put in a barrier. Unfortunately, there's 20-foot gaps in the barrier from where the bamboo is. Once you've experienced it, you're absolutely correct. It's going to keep coming back. What we have noticed is where the barriers went in, yeah, there's stuff come back, but as you pull it out, you get more and more of those rhizomes. So each year it goes down. We have not asked our neighbors to do that. We do that on our own. All we want to do is know there's an end in sight. And what we mean by that is contain it so that, yeah, we know there's stuff on our property. So be it. It happens. Life isn't always fair. Have them contain it so at least the problem doesn't keep coming back every year in terms of new growth. So the stuff that's on our property, we have been very successful now. If you go look at our things, we've really gotten most of it away. Where we're having the problems was where the barrier wasn't put in. And that was the standard of the ordinance. Simple as that. It's my property. I will do what I have to do to remediate it. You know, to the extent where they're saying it's small claims court, it is not small claims court. The various costs, the reasons why I'm doing it, the effective remediation just for our property was north of $20,000. It is huge. And that does not take into account the fact that we've lost indigenous plants because the roots are so invasive and it clogs everything up. All we're looking for is get the containment, because you're absolutely right. It's going to keep coming back. But once you contain it, yeah, when I pull out a big rhizome when it comes up in the spring, next year, I might have missed one, but it's easier. And as long as there's not new stuff coming across, because we're not against bamboo. You know, I heard someone say it makes a beautiful barrier. It actually really does. But it's also, and the stuff is insidious. You let it go. One shoot can go as far as 3 miles. So when people say, oh, it's not really a public nuisance issue, wait till it starts hitting your water lines. Wait till it starts hitting having lived with it and the amount of remediation we've done, and the barriers work there. And there's hundreds of municipalities across the country that have done this. And oh, by the way, in that handout that just got handed out, the 3rd page is what Ladue just upgraded.
Great.
So
Carol,
Yeah,
I have a question.
Yeah, So when you say contain it, how?
Unfortunately, we have a lot of experience with this, so we've done a lot of research, and quite frankly, we're probably one of the main motivators as to why this ordinance got put in. I mean, we presented a binder this thick of research. There is a material that bamboo is impervious to getting through, and if you go down 3 feet, and it's only around that thick, so if you just do a 3-foot trench, drop that thing down and keep it 4 inches above, no more bamboo is going to come across that. Ain't going to stop the stuff that's on the other side. But as you see the other stuff come up, it then becomes easier to gently dig it out, gently get it around your other, say, indigenous plants or things of that nature. And I can tell you, and Carlos is well aware, I mean, he's got thousands of pictures. What our property looks like now from when this first started, because the remediation that did get, like the barrier that was put in to code has worked. Where we're still having the continuous problem was where the barrier wasn't put in. And that was our frustration was, well, the code's very specific. If you can see bamboo on their property all here and there's no barrier, put a barrier. That's all. If you want to have a successful ordinance, in my opinion, do not go on remediation and mitigate. Stop it. And then you're gonna have to let the impacted parties know that, hey, to completely get it off your property is going to take another 2 or 3 years. And it looks like it's actually a 2 to 3 year cycle. 3 year could go as far as 5. But
Go ahead, Carol.
So you're saying our ordinance required required your neighbor to contain, but
contain and mitigate.
contain
And it
and
was
mitigate.
and what's happened
But
is
what I'm not understanding is where the barriers weren't. It allowed the bamboo to keep coming. Was the containment that was required not adequate? Is that what the problem was? Or what is it that we could do differently with regards to containment?
for lack of a better, let me just use this as a border.
Sure.
Okay. So we have bamboo that started here and grew all along here. The barrier 3 feet down was put in here. The barrier was put in here, not here and here. So to me,
So in the little gaps in the yard where there wasn't.
this stuff, it keeps on coming through. Now, do we have growth on our side where the barrier puts in? Absolutely. But you know what? The first year, first time after the barrier was done, then we come to the new season. Guess what? Not as much the next year because no new stuff is coming over. So as you find the stuff that comes up, you pull it up. That's our, we treat that as our responsibility. I think the gentleman, Mr. Martin, said, government can't solve everything. Absolutely not. But just understand how insidious this stuff is. And as much as I've heard a lot of this, it's neighbors to neighbors. You let it go unchecked, it's not going to be one neighbor to one neighbor. It's going to be an entire neighborhood. And it's going to be your public properties. That's when it's a real nuisance. And not to get into anything really nasty, but when you start looking at the other unintended consequences of bamboo, you realize it's a favorite nesting spot for rats and stuff like that. There's a lot of negative side effects. And it's like, okay, if that's what the neighbor wants to do and they like that, personally, I would have put in clumping bamboo because you get the same thing and it doesn't spread because it's the running bamboo that's the issue. Contain it. But then you're going to have to educate the impacted neighbors to say, it's contained now. You're not going to get any new stuff coming over. But the stuff on your property, as it comes up, you're going to have to dig it up. And yes, that process is going to take 3 years. But you know what? We got your back. You ain't got no more new stuff coming through. And you got to work on it. And to me, that's a fair compromise because it doesn't put an undue burden on our planning department and their enforcement. Because it's pretty easy. It's like, I think when they do the research, they're going to see it's just membrane And it's really not that expensive. You know, where you're gonna get into problems if you have to cut through roots to put the membrane down. And I think that's why they didn't put the barrier in where they did, because they're, oh no, it's gonna hurt our honeysuckle tree. But
No,
yeah, it's a horrible thing and it's not. You know, we have to take as an owner, you know, you have to take responsibility for your own property. And just give me a chance to be able to take care of my own property. That's all I'm asking all of that to provide. And I think that's a rational request.
His follow-up answered it.
Okay,
So I'm good.
fantastic, fantastic. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you,
Appreciate
guys.
it.
I appreciate the time
Mhm.
tonight.
All right, Carlos.
Okay, bear with me 1 second, Chairman. All right, I'm gonna stop the share.
14th.
Sorry.
That's right, you're good. I want to remind everybody that Saturday, October 14th will be the movie in the park. It will be at Villa Park. And that will be kind of like the celebration of the opening and view of the improvements that went on at Villa Park. Very, very, very exciting. All the water functions have been turned off for the season. I will be attending the municipal league meeting as a representative on the 19th of October. We do have an Olivet Shred Electronics event happening, and that will happen on Friday, October 20th. That will be at Stacy Park, and that will be from 4 p.m. until 7 p.m. I was told you can bring 2 TVs, no charge for 2 TVs. Beyond 2, there'll be a little charge fee. October 21st, we have a star party at Stacy Park that starts at 7 o'clock. And then your city council will have a council retreat on Sunday, October 22nd. There will be a VIP Five Oaks opening. I'm hopeful that you all got your invites. That will be October 25th at 7 p.m. And then Saturday, October 28th, will be the Olivet Harvest Festival, where we will be judging costumes, Halloween costumes, and maybe some of us will be wearing Halloween costumes. And that is really my report for October. I hope to see you all out and about. Please take care of yourselves, stay healthy.
Thanks, Missy. Jack, Dawn, nothing? Anybody else? That being said, we'll adjourn at 9:15.